Hello, I'll be showing a simple way to change light maps in your VRChat world using Udon. Just before I begin, I will point out a few things. In my example, I have all of my lights set to baked, including the sun or the directional light. You may or may not be doing that, it shouldn't really matter. And one thing to keep in mind is you should probably have your environment lighting source set to skybox. If you have it set to gradient and you're doing this for, say, like a day night versions of your scene or house or whatever, I'm gonna have to change this to black when you make the night version. But if you have it set to skybox, it won't really matter, since the skybox itself will just follow your sun, and that's what's gonna control how it looks like this. Okay, and now we can actually begin. We will do that by first we'll prepare everything that we need, which is the light maps themselves. Gonna start by just baking the day version of the scene to get its light maps. I won't be talking about how this works just right now. I will save that to the end of this, just to save your time and show you the thingy immediately. Okay, so now that we have the daytime, I'm gonna be creating another scene for the nighttime. Now you just set up what you want for the nighttime. Put your sun's rotation to minus 90 or something. After everything is done, you just hit generate. Now that we have both of our light maps, we'll open our script. Now, to begin, there are a few variables that we have to assign. First is going to be the light maps themselves, obviously, which are texture 2Ds. So I'm gonna make a texture 2D that's serialized so that we can actually put it or assign it in the editor. And I'm gonna call this one daylight map. And another thing that you're gonna need, but I won't go over why just yet, is another texture 2D, which I'll be calling light map direct. And lastly, for the day thingy, we're gonna need a cube map. I'll go over why we need that later. Just call it reflection probe. Okay, now we'll copy these and do the same thing for night, just changing the day to night instead. That's our setup for the light maps. Now what we need is the objects that we're gonna be changing the light map of, which is the render for those objects. I'm gonna make it into array because I'm gonna have more than just one renderer that I'm gonna be changing the light map of. Now I'll add another serialized field, but this time it's going to be a transform for the sun, so that I can actually change the rotation of it to change this skybox into night. And lastly, a material block or property block. I'll go over why later as well. And that's all of our variables. Now to start, we will assign or initialize our material property block as a new material property block. That's all we're gonna be doing in start. Now we're gonna start actually making our time controlling functions, which in this case, I'm gonna start with change to day. And now We want to change the light map all of our renderers, so we're gonna do that using a for each statement and make it into renderer for renderers. Now we're gonna grab the material black of every renderer, and we can do that with a function that's called get property block. Put it in our material property block that we created. And now we want to actually set the light map data for the material block, which can be done by material property block, and it's a function that's called set texture. That's what we'll be using in this case. First, we'll be doing our light map itself, which is unity underscore light map, and now you will pass in the texture value, which would be light map itself, or the texture 2D that we created. Now another thing, material property block again, set texture, and this time we're gonna be doing it for light map int, which stands for indirect. Again, more explanation in a little bit. And the last thing that we'll be needing for this is set texture unity underscore spec cube 1. I'll go over this in a bit and set it to reflection probe. Now this whole thing is just to set the light map data to our material block, and now what we're gonna do is set this material block that we edited back into our renderer, which we'll be doing that by using another method called set property block to our material property block that we created and edited. And this is all that we're gonna be doing to change the light map. Now just a thing that I'll be adding for my case is changing the rotation of the sun to make it actually day, which would be, and the rest is 0. Doesn't have to be like that, but I'm just gonna be doing it like this to make it into exactly noon, where the sun would be right above you. Now that's our change today. We'll be copying all of that and just make it into change tonight, and change a few names, all of the names of our variables, change it tonight, and reverse the rotation to -90, which would be directly below you, as in pretty much like midnight. And this is it for our script. It is fairly simple. There are a few things that count as disadvantages to it that I'll be going over in the end. Now we'll just test it and see how it works. Gonna create a game object that's gonna hold our script, which in this case I'll just name it lightmap switcher, the same as my script. Add the lightmap switcher, and now we want to assign all of our variables, so we'll start with locking my inspector to make it easier to put the things in. Firstly is going to be our comp light thingy. That's our actual light map that's gonna contain the lighting itself. Next is the comp dir, which is gonna be the directional data. We'll put that in the indirect, and the daylight reflection probe is just the reflection probe right here. Go over to the night tab and do the exact same thing. Put all of the variables, or assign all of the variables. In our renderers tab, we'll put everything that we want to change the light map of, which in this case I'll just put everything. You might just put in a single room of your house or a single area. It doesn't really matter. And lastly, I'll just set the transform of my sun. And we're done. That's it. You can now just start and test it out. Go over to the scene. Okay. And run our custom event that we made to change night. And here we go. It's gonna change to night exactly how it should be and day exactly how it should be. That is it really. You can assign buttons to run any of these events or whatever that you want to do. And you can just close the video now. I'll just explain a few more things for why are we using the reflection probes and the direction thingies and whatnot. So more detail on what we're doing here is for each of our renders here, they have a shader, and this shader has a bunch of properties for managing how your object looks. One of those properties is lightmaps. What we're doing here is we're changing that light map, which would make the shader render the object itself differently with different light settings and just make it look different as if it's lit differently. And the reason we set some of our variables like the daylight reflection probe and the nightlight reflection probe is since our shader has a few properties which include the light map itself, the light map indirect, which is the baked indirect light itself, and the spec cube holds in any kind of reflection data. What would happen if you didn't actually set the spec cube of the property block? It would make it look pretty weird. So it's easiest to notice in a night setting. So if I comment this out and save now, what we'll see when we switch our light to night. Okay. Now switch it. It will have this weird reflection-y kind of look, and that's because whenever you bake lighting, it doesn't just bake the lighting itself, it also bakes in an extra reflection probe or reflection probe data, which is this one in this case. Since we didn't change it in our code after commenting this out, what's happening is it's just using the reflection probe data from the day bake, which gives it this weird reflection. That's pretty much all that I really wanted to point out or explain. I hope this was helpful to you in any way. I would appreciate it if you comment any kind of ideas or things that you would like to see next, preferably things that do not have a tutorial. That's why I did this in the first place. I was trying to change light maps for my world. There was absolutely no tutorial whatsoever to actually do that, at least not that any that I could find besides ones that were really old from SDK 2.0, which required you to duplicate your meshes and whatnot, which while that definitely worked, it was not ideal. It makes your world size skyrocket pretty much. This, however, it's not perfect. You will still have to add all of these together, which also add to your world size, but it's better than having both the duplicated meshes increase it, as well as the light map data itself, because that would also get baked in. That is it. The next tutorial I'll be making is for MMD worlds, how to make, or not necessarily MMD to be exact, more like how to force a player's avatar to do to play an animation for whatever, like whether you want it to be a dance animation, some kind of other animation that you have for a game or something. That will be for the next tutorial, and for now just goodbye.